Hi, good afternoon, members of the Malaysian Dutch Business Council and guests and friends of the MDBC community and the guests of our speakers today. Hello, everyone. My name is Marco, and on behalf of the MDBC team and out of the MDBC office, I welcome you this afternoon from wherever you're logging in. As always, we're welcoming members from Malaysia, from Singapore, from the Netherlands, and today I believe we even welcome guests from Belgium, India, and the US. If we have missed your country, you're logging in from anywhere else, please share with us because it's always nice to know where we have the audience from. All right, more than ever, over the past 4 months, our MDBC team has been working around the clock to bring you all relevant information on COVID-19 and the Malaysian Movement Control Order to make sure that we can continue our engagement and bring our community together. You have been following our often daily emails and announcements on webinars. We really appreciate to see you here with us online today. We are now nearly halfway the recovery MCO, which will run until the 31st of August. As you can clearly see from the traffic, each day an increasing number of people are going back to their office, while many other institutions and venues are also opening up now, from schools to swimming pools. And the organization of functions is allowed as long as we maintain all SOPs. Which brings me to our first poll. How enthusiastic or desperate or composed are you for a next live networking event? Can you please take a couple of seconds to answer this first question? Yeah, you really want to see us live again? Wait for September, or you're happy just doing what you're doing, looking at us from your screen? All right. 3, 2, 1, close. All right, thank you. We're going to get the results in a moment. That's fine, you can bring them on screen. And in the meantime, oh, there they are already. This time, okay, we're getting there. Every week, there's a little bit more on the top. Desperate for some real networking. Okay, guys, we're going to get ready for that. Something will happen in August and definitely already in September, as you saw just now from our list of upcoming events. Thank you for your first input. Great. All right. Because our members can do with some extra support at this moment in time, we dedicated the month of July to our classic Members for Members concept. What does this M4M mean? We take a certain topic, and in 1 hour, we invite between 4 to 6 MDBC member companies in this field to share market developments and insights and product knowledge. Of course, it's also a bit of a business pitch, as long as we can all benefit from it, especially if we can include some leaders in their respective fields, as is the case today. Before we start the session, let me take you through our few house rules and announcements. Your mics and video are switched off throughout the webinar session to avoid any disruptions for the speakers. We don't take questions immediately after the presentations for each speaker, but we wait until all 5 presenters are done and then have a panel. Okay, we're still going to get you involved throughout this hour through all kinds of polls that the speakers have brought in as well. After the 5th and last speaker, we will do our Q&A with the moderator and all speakers. Along the way, you can post your questions in the Q&A box. So not in the chat, please, but in the Q&A box. We might invite you at the end to unmute and to personally ask your questions to the speakers and the moderator during the Q&A. So please be on standby then. We are pleased to announce that today's speakers will make their presentations available, and this webinar session will be recorded and published. You will get the links to everything in a thank you email by next week. Okay, now on to our actual program. As with all our current events, it's great to be able to pool resources and experience out of the MDBC membership community. And this certainly applies to today's M4M session as well. You will get 5 speakers and a moderator who are market leaders and experts willing to share experiences and insights with you. In the opening slides, you have already seen the profiles of the speakers and the moderator, so I won't do any introductions and we'll go straight into the program. Here's our moderator, Dr. David Gonzalez, CEO of the Malaysia Institute for Supply Chain Innovation, MISI. Over to you, Dave. Go ahead.
Thank you, Marco. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session. As you know, supply chains have been on the front and center of pretty much every country across the globe under the COVID-19 pandemic. I think everyone who didn't know what a supply chain is now does. Today, we have a great collection of speakers across the spectrum of both industry and academia to discuss the role of supply chains going forward. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Jeroen Hendricks. He's the Director of Art of Supply Chain, and he's going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the Malaysian logistics sector. Over to you, Jeroen.
Dr. David, thank you very much. MDBC, all participants, thank you very much for spending your time with me. Let me share my presentation with all of you. The topic for this M4M actually came quite timely. I started just recently a project to analyze the Malaysian logistics sector. And this is it's quite difficult because publicly available data is limited and often outdated. So this presentation I'll focus mostly on pallet and box 3PLs as compared to other supply chain streams like cold chain or DG or maritime. First, I would like to go through some market characteristics. The general Malaysian logistics market, a couple of characteristics. Malaysia is a trading nation, of course, so a lot of logistics companies are involved in import and export. There is a different internal market, Borneo and Peninsula. Borneo is much more focused on agriculture, wood and palm oil, whereas Peninsula is much more varied with a lot of industry as well here. And one thing that I also want to mention is there's no neighborly competition, whereas a Singaporean company or a Thai company cannot operate in Malaysia under their Singaporean or Thai entities. They would have to put up a Malaysian entity, and as a supply chain professional, that always stings a bit. Why can't I just move my container from Kuala Lumpur all the way to Bangkok and I have to move it to another trailer on the Thai border? There are three main categories in players, as I see it. That you have the local players, heavy on assets, specialization based on assets and regulations, not on industry. So what you'll see mostly is logistics players in, for example, cold chain or DG or oil and gas or agriculture, but not so specific on food or retail, etc. It is cheap labor focused, not technology focused. It is still, I would call it, traditional and relationship based, and mostly family owned, now going to second or third generation. Then, of course, you've got the MNCs. They're usually low on assets and they focus on MNCs. They largely come here to support their global contracts, except where they bought into the Malaysian market. For example, Yusen, who bought Tasco, and CJ, who bought Century. They still have a legacy with smaller local customers and a lot of assets. And then, of course, there's the market disruptors. For example, iCargo. They do have a certain share of the market, but when I talk to players in the market, to be honest, companies like iCargo don't really come up. Right, so then a 3PL, like I said, a lot of information is not publicly available, so people tend to go to the logistics companies which are traded on the KLCE, the Bursa. I've done that as well. I've put up a little graph here. As you can see, the revenue, which is the line per quarter, these about 11 3PL companies. There are more, but they are in maritime or e-commerce. I picked the ones which are more in the traditional logistics. They make about 700 million per quarter. You see that it goes up, so that's good. But what you also see is 2020, the first quarter was break even. Now, when I talk to people, I talk to the companies listed and the companies not listed. We don't expect Q2 to be any better. Revenues fell. The most that I heard was 70%. Mostly what I hear is 40% during MCO. It really depends whether it's an essential, if they have customers who were deemed essential or not. But what was interesting in this situation is that even big companies who previously tried to spread out their risk by offering different services like transport and warehouse and ocean and air freight are all equally hit, because as you know, transport was greatly reduced, but warehouses, a lot of the companies, they make contracts where they provide a lower rental for the warehouse and they try to make money from the in-out. And as you can imagine, during MCO, this has greatly reduced. Ocean freight, of course, also greatly removed. Greatly reduced. The air freight is an exception. Air freight rates went up by 400–500%. This doesn't mean that the 3PLs actually made more money, but if they were lucky and they got a charter, they might actually produce some good numbers for Q2. One problem which I hear when I talk to everyone is cash. There was, of course, the government assistance, the moratorium on loan repayments. A lot of the assets that especially local companies have are, of course, on loan. So this helped the salary payments, helped the program where the government would subsidize. There was a cap, as you'll know, of 4,500 ringgit to apply. Drivers make between 3,000 and 6,000 ringgit, but their structure is such that they get a large portion from the bonus. For every trip, they get a 15 ringgit or 25 ringgit. So the basic wage is minimum wage. So it's 1,100–1,200 ringgit. So they were actually able to take advantage of this rule. Then, of course, there was the fuel price reduction. At the best point of MCO, it was 30% less. So this was good. It wasn't all bad, but unfortunately, these two don't weigh up to a revenue loss of 40%. So it has hit their cash. When I look at the 11 3PLs on the Bursa, they had 7–8% in cash of the pre-COVID revenue. During MCO, they might have gone to 60%, so they'll go to 12% of the revenue. That's still that might seem like an okay number. The problem is with logistics that a lot of importers use the logistics company to pre-finance their imports. So a lot of this cash is actually tied up. The 3PLs prepay the duties, the depot charges, the D&D charges. They would have to pay right away to take the container out. They will only get their money back depending on the payment term, which is usually 30 days. So this is a problem which I hear from everyone. For my last slide, 2020, how I see it is more pain still to come for 3PLs on all fronts. The cost will increase. The government assistance will end, of course. The fuel price, I don't see that it will decrease. We'll have to see, of course, whether it will increase a lot or whether it will be stable. But I think we all expect that the chance of it getting higher is higher than going down. At the same time, revenues are under pressure. As I said, Malaysia is a trading nation. They expect between 20 and about 35% less global trade. Now, companies are not 100% focused on trade, of course, so that translates into a local demand reduction of they're expecting about 10–30%. At the same time, you see an increase of competition where people are trying to undercut and trying to steal each other's customers away. The third problem that I see is a cash flow problem. I'm a proponent of technology, also in supply chain, especially in supply chain. I'm happy that it's getting some focus right now. The problem now is that people they see the benefit of technology, but they don't have cash. The good thing is that there is a second, third generation of especially talking about the local players coming up who see the benefit of technology more than the first generation. So we might see a change. I'm not convinced though that 2020 and the COVID and the technology push that everyone is talking about, and that you do see in other industries, will happen for the local logistics industry. Then, of course, lastly, are the other risks in 2020 besides a second wave or other problems that COVID might be worse than what we expect. You've got US-China, you've got the trade war, of course. We might actually get into a physical combat situation between US and China. China itself, of course, is a risk. China is importing, changing their importing pattern. They're making a lot more themselves. A lot of global companies with the global supply chains are moving out of China. I don't hear much of Malaysia being a beneficiary of that, unfortunately. So all in all, to finish off my presentation, I see that 2020 for the 3PLs, COVID has hit them hard, and I don't foresee that 2020 will be anything else but survival and not profit for the 3PLs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. Thank you for that insightful review of the Malaysian logistics sector and also the challenges that are faced both currently and in the near future. Appreciate that. I'm sure our participants will have a lot of questions for you. And a reminder to the participants, again, you can post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our next speaker is Dr. Debarata Ghosh. He is an associate professor at the Malaysia Institute for Supply Chain Innovation. And he's going to be talking to us about drafting a sustainability agenda during COVID-19. Over to you, Deb. Deb, you might want to unmute.
Please unmute, Deb.
Sorry. Thanks, Dave, and thanks to everyone here for the invite, and thanks to everyone who is here for the webinar today. To begin with, I have two poll questions that I want to run past the attendees. So can I ask the first poll question to be posted now? Okay, so this question is, if I had $100 and if I were to allocate all of it on one function only, what would your choice be? If you had $100 as part of a policymaker, or you are leading an organization, where would you like to allocate it today? And the choices are given here.
All right, everybody, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please submit. Thank you.
Great. And okay, so we have the answer here. And most people say 40% digital transformation, 20% is to demand generation and job creation. And what is interesting for me is 4% for environmental sustainability. Great. So now can we have the second poll question, please? Okay, so the second poll question is, how important would sustainability issues be in the COVID-19 world? What's your opinion? And the choices are given here.
I think that would be a quick choice for everybody. So I'm immediately going back to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Submit. Thank you.
Okay, now 46% say it's going to be very important, but as a leader or as a decision maker, we can go ahead and close this poll. But as a leader and a decision maker, when we have to make a decision of where we want to allocate the money right now, short term, clearly sustainability is the least priority. So we can see the digression there. We have the intent, but the action is something else. So that's what we want to talk about in this presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, just a couple of seconds here. Okay, so as we just mentioned, so my topic is drafting a sustainability agenda during the COVID-19. And we are going to undertake a very supply chain centric discussion around this. But let's start with a couple of data points here. Let me see if I can highlight this to you. So notice here that the table that I have here is essentially somewhere around 2015 when most countries entered the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And these were the top 4 polluters that time. They continue to be still. And look at the last column that I'm highlighting here, which was China at around that time was contributing 23.75% of the global GHG emissions. US was about 12.10%. EU, as a block was 8.9%. Then India 5.73, and then we had Brazil and Russia and all the other countries as well. The right side of the graph that you see here is, and if I may highlight this, was the commitment, which was somewhere around here. We are here now, 2019, 2020, was the commitment that countries had given that, by this X years, which is 2030, 2035, which is the gray shaded area, the dark blue line is the commitments to reduce emissions and push the global temperature below 1.5 degrees C of what it was in the 2015 or 2005 era. Now, this itself was struggling around that time. So the orange, light shade orange graph that you see was where we were heading to. Now, what has happened in this period is where I want to focus. What has happened in this period is essentially that the while there was an initial happiness around the fact that there was a lot of talk that global emissions have gone down because economic activities have slowed, what has happened is this most often than not tends to rebound back. And there was a very interesting article in Washington Post which said that, look, after every recessionary period or after every period, for example, the last one was 2008 financial crisis, after every period, the emissions take a dip, but they come back with equal aggression the years after. Now, the reason I say this is, let me just move to the second one. Yeah, the reason I say this is many of the impact of COVID-19, while it's focused on humans and the job losses that has happened, there have been some unintended consequences. And some of those consequences is what we are representing here through these concentric circles. One of the consequences where we classify it as behavioral factors. The other consequences where we classify it as medical safety factors. And the third consequence, which is at the bottom of the circle, is what we classify as economic factors. So I'll just walk you through this very quickly. Medical care factors, what we classify here is the amount of medical waste that is being produced today. And to give you an example, a recent BBC report showed that we are discarding 129 billion face masks per month and 65 billion plastic gloves per month. And many of these countries, all of these countries, some of them may have recycling capabilities, some of them may be incinerating it, but it is very likely that much of this is reaching our oceans. To give you another example, there has been increased plastic consumption, reduced recycling because many of the municipalities were closed down. And for example, 200 tons of trash was being produced per day in Wuhan, alone during the peak of the pandemic. Now, if I were to move through this quicker, uh, among the behavioral factors, what we have noticed is, because now we want to, less human interaction, so more plastics are making way into our lives. So for example, contactless deliveries, single use plastics. And it is likely that many organizations, as we saw in the poll, given a choice, will perhaps cut down on their CSR budgets or in their environmental budgets, and are likely going to, in the short run at least, are going to focus more on job creation, demand creation, digital transformations, so on. We also call the second one unshared economy. And unshared economy is essentially the fact that where we were essentially very comfortable with the likes of Uber pools, etc., we are likely not going to see that. And what we are going to see is extensive people, preferring personal vehicles more, private vehicles more, perhaps one person, one car. All the events which were perhaps, 6 months or a year back were being kind of said, that were being told not to do this in order to be more environmentally conscious, and it is likely going to return back. The last one is overstocking and overproduction. I think the first speaker did talk about, some issues with China supplies, etc. And we are likely going to see an effort of organizations trying to decouple their supply chains to certain extent possible. We are talking about reshoring supply chains, moving back some amount of production facilities. While 100% that may not happen, what can essentially happen is stocking in different points, so that tomorrow, if such a pandemic arises, whether it's food supply chains, we do not run short of the material. So it's likely going to be an overstocking. The last one is economic factors. I think we have all seen that. But one point that we want to stress upon is a lot of stimulus packages are being designed by policymakers. But what can actually happen is they may actually land up bailing out a lot of those traditional carbon polluters. Very few countries have taken a conscious effort to essentially define what is called as green stimulus packages. And some of those countries are Germany and South Korea, who are essentially saying, look, it's time to look at technology. It's time to recreate something that we were perhaps doing wrong in our production processes, in our supply chains. And our subsidies, our stimulus packages are here to encourage those environmental friendly technologies only. Now, these are some of the pictures that I wanted to show you. So this was in Ukraine. You can see plastics flying all over, very recently taken. These are published in BBC News. This is another one. And they have a very quick video, and I'll encourage you to take a look at those videos as well when time permits. But so in terms of solutions, what can we do? This is my last slide here. In terms of solutions, short run, perhaps, as we saw in the poll, it is likely that people are going to focus on jobs, on perhaps health and safety of workers, which is a social aspect of sustainability, and that's great. But slightly mid to long term, we need to think of technology as a way forward to resolve some of the polluting processes that we had. Maybe robotic segregation of waste, more emphasis on recycling and remanufacturing. In transportation, it is high time that policymakers balance the growth of private vehicles while subsidizing development of eco-friendly vehicles. And lastly, consumer nudge policies. Consumer nudge is actually a bit of a behavioral science, where you design policies in a way to push consumers to kind of consume more environmental friendly products. So all in all, short term, we may not see emphasis on sustainability, but long term, mid to long term, there is likely chance that policies can be designed to move consumers and industries towards environmental friendly growth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Deb, for that intriguing poll, and also showing us how the difference between closing the gap between intention and action. I know personally during the MCO, we have been ordering a huge amount of food from Food Panda and so on, and I think we have enough plastic containers now for the rest of my life as well as my children's life. So thanks, Deb. And let's move on to our next speaker. This is Professor Marco Tiemann. He's the CEO of LBB International. And he's going to talk to us about supply chain management for halal in an emerging requirement. Go ahead, Marco.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. David. I would also like to thank the MDBC for inviting me. I will get my slides on. So I will be talking about the topic of halal supply chain management, an emerging requirement. I will be covering the topics of the evolution of halal and mega trends, a case study on Indonesia, modern halal valley, why adopting a supply chain approach to halal. Also about the Malaysia's new halal supply chain standard, the MS 2400-2019, and how to develop an end-to-end halal supply chain. Before I proceed, can I have the first poll question on, please? So the first poll question is, why is halal supply chain management important? You can only choose one. So the first one is there is a requirement of a halal certification under the Malaysian, this is a requirement for halal certification in the Malaysian halal product standards for food, cosmetics, or pharma. A second possibility is that the Malaysian consumer demands halal supply chain management for all halal certified products. And thirdly, this is needed for an effective risk and reputation management by the brand owner. So please choose now. I want to see the results only later after a few slides, so don't show the results. So in the meantime, I will proceed to the next slide. So the evolution of halal and mega trends. So I did my PhD on halal supply chain management and wanting to understand what is halal all about. So in my research, I found out that halal is not static, but highly dynamic in nature. In fact, halal goes through an evolution from a Muslim company where the company is not halal certified to a halal product where the manufacturer or the restaurant is halal certified. In the third stage, halal is addressed throughout the supply chain from source to the point of consumer purchase. And in the fourth stage, we talk about the halal value chain, where we also address sustainability, Islamic banking and finance, and Islamic branding, and many more. We're now moving to the third stage of the halal supply chain, where also risk and reputation management will be very important. So what are some of the halal industry mega trends we see? So first of all, next to food, also non-food needs to be halal certified. So we talk here about cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, but also industrial products. Secondly, halal requires a supply chain approach. It's not anymore good enough to be compliant at source. So similar to food safety, halal needs to be addressed end to end. Thirdly, also halal risk and reputation management will be critical for an effective protection of your halal reputation and license to operate. Can I see the poll results, please? You have the poll results?
Marco, not yet. That will come up in a moment. We'll let you know. Thank you. Sorry. We'll continue.
Otherwise, we will move that to later. So one of the projects I've been working on is in Indonesia, Modern Halal Valley. Modern Halal Valley is a 500 hectares halal industrial development in Indonesia on the island of Java. And Modern Halal Valley, 500 hectares, is about 1 hour drive from Jakarta. It is also close to the airport as well as the seaport. Modern Halal Valley is an advanced halal industrial cluster. It has area for production, halal production, area for SMEs. We have pre-built SME spaces that comply with HACCP standards. We have food industry there, logistics industry, and we'll have a direct connection also to the seaport Tanjung Priok. We also have a commercial area where we also have halal labs from the Indonesian Halal Authority. I don't say this is a halal park, I'm saying this is a halal cluster, because what we do, we connect also this cluster to farming areas throughout Indonesia, and also connect this cluster to clusters, halal clusters inside Indonesia, as well as clusters outside Indonesia. So we are connecting to Spain, to Malaysia, to Penang halal cluster, to Johor halal cluster, and many, many more. The poll results are ready for the first poll.
Unfortunately, there's a technical hiccup in the back office here. So for the moment, please continue. Sorry. Thank you.
I hear there are some technical issues on the poll, so we will leave that for later. So why is it important to adopt a supply chain approach to halal? First of all, halal supply chains are vulnerable and complex also to manage. So what we find in a lot of halal supply chains is that halal is not the consolidation requirements in the consolidation in transport, in trucks, in sea containers, as well as air containers, the so-called unit load devices or air cargo pallets. We also see that there are different knowledge levels in halal supply chain. So the manufacturer is halal certified, people are trained on halal, the distributor is not halal certified, nobody is trained on halal, the transporter is not halal certified, or is halal certified but has its own system which is not compliant or not similar to the system of the brand owner. So we have different practices, and what I always say is your integrity of your halal supply chain is as strong as its weakest link and not as the strongest link. Thirdly, halal state is not always communicate on freight documents. So if you don't communicate halal, you also cannot effectively segregate halal. Furthermore, there are different requirements in Muslim markets. So Malaysia has different requirements than Indonesia, Brunei, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and in Africa. So halal becomes quite complex. So what we see is that there are serious gaps in halal supply chains, resulting in a deficient halal assurance system, and foremost also that brands are exposed that can lose also their license to operate, and important also their halal brand and the reputation. If it's possible, I would like to move on to the Asian standard MS 2400 and come up with the second poll question for you. Could you please share the second poll question? Is it possible to share the second poll question?
Yes, it's coming right up. Second poll.
Yeah. So the second poll question, which we'll see shortly, is: have you heard of the Malaysian Halal Supply Chain Management System standard, the MS 2400? It was launched in 2010 and the revision was in 2019. So have you heard about the Malaysian Halal Supply Chain Management System standard? Yes or no? That can, I think, be done very short, and you can also straight away submit your answer. Is it possible to share the results of this, or for later, for the second poll, please? All right, so many have not heard about this standard from 2010. So the halal standard is a development of a halal assurance system foremost. So you have an existing quality management system and you want to get halal certified. So you develop a halal assurance system on top of your quality management system. A halal assurance system does not replace your QMS, but sits on top of it. The Malaysian standard was introduced in 2010 already. It has a transportation, warehouse, and retailing module, and it's certified by JAKIM. So you can be certified for logistics operators, which many are then already certified since 2015, as well as for retailers. So now I would like to pose the third poll question to you. Please, if you can put the third poll question on. So how many retailers or supermarkets are certified according to this MS 2400? How many retailers or supermarkets do you think are halal certified according to that standard? Please submit your question or your answer now.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Please submit. Thank you. Results are coming up.
Oh. 5. Well, I have to disappoint you, but there were some people right. So there have not been any supermarkets retailers certified in Malaysia yet, according to that standard, although the standard was available since 2010. So I think there are opportunities for retailers to look at this. I would like to proceed. So how to develop an end-to-end halal supply chain then? What you have to realize that when you want to develop a halal supply chain, you have to address 3 things. So first of all, you have to address cross-contamination. You can do that by using packaging material, which in most industries is common sense. Secondly, you have to look at risk of contamination, which you can address by proper physical segregation, as well as proper communication on your freight documents. A third component you have to address is the perception of the Muslim consumers. So depending on the Muslim market you're sending it to, you have to comply on certain specific requirements. So Malaysia and Indonesia require, for example, ritual cleansing, and ritual cleansing is not practiced, for example, in Africa or the Middle East. So when you develop a halal supply chain, you have to organize supply chain differently for Muslim countries and for non-Muslim countries. So for Muslim countries, it will be more stringent as compared to sending in product delivery to Europe, for non-Muslim markets, Singapore or Thailand, as compared to Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or Indonesia. It has to be halal by design. So you have to develop a halal policy, supply chain objectives, command and control of your supply chain. You have to address training, IT system, business processes, and also look at who are my suppliers and distributors. So these are important components in your design. So if you want to know more about halal supply chain management, you can read a lot of my academic papers, and also later this year there will be a book out on halal business management, which will also cover this. Thank you very much. This was my presentation. I would like to give it back to Doctor. Thank you.
All right, Marco, but in the meantime, we do have the results for you for the first poll. So we still owe you that one. So if we can quickly put that on the screen right now. There we are.
Okay. So the poll results. So why is halal supply chain management important? So this is a requirement for halal certification. A lot of people have said so. Technically, it is required to do segregation in storage and transport. It is not being enforced. So that is, it's not really a right and wrong answer. The third one is about risk and reputation management, which is nowadays very important. The consumer, many people said the consumer is responsible or wants this, demands this. There are no yet big banners out around the Twin Towers of demanding halal supply chain management. But if you do surveys among the Muslim consumers, many Muslim consumers will argue that it is important to have an end-to-end design of halal, including logistics and supply chain. Thank you very much. I will pass it back to Dr. David.
Thank you very much, Professor Tiemann. I appreciate your insights. And I think given that over half of us didn't know the standards existed, you've done a great job educating us today. So thanks for that very much. Again, I will repeat, if you have any questions and questions for the panelists, please place them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our next panelist is Mr. Harm Emmaus. He is the Managing Director of Bolore Logistics in Malaysia. And he's going to talk to us about challenges in supply chain management during the MCO and the RMCO. So without further ado, Harm, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. David. Thank you, members, for having me here. RMCO, MCO, tough times, and they're still tough at this moment as we speak. I will share with you a little bit on how we have dealt with this and are still dealing with it. So challenges in supply chain management during MCO and RMCO. Next page. First about Bolloré, let's say we are one of the leading top 10 global freight forwarders, 20,000 people globally. And as you can see, the red dots are almost everywhere on the globe. So we have a vast network of solutions and possibilities and experts. What is supply chain management? Here is the definition, but it's basically just, okay, how do we move raw materials? How do we move them to products and transform them into, let's say, to the retailers and then to the end customers? What some of you might not always know is that our role as a freight forwarder, we are service providers. We connect suppliers, manufacturers, customers, end users with solutions, moving their goods from A to B. We do services that as you as a business would normally not capable of doing, and we help you with that. So we do custom clearance. We help take care of your customs declaration. We pay the duties on your behalf in certain cases. We arrange trucking for you, ocean, air, sea freight, rail, or even a combination of both, 2 or 3. Contract logistics, business to business, business to consumer, value-added services. We do control towers, 4PL. So the services that we provide are a lot. Yeah, so you don't have to. And we do as well also heavy cargo. Now, what happened, let's say, in the beginning of the year, there's the COVID pandemic starts. First, it starts in China. Now, China is, as we know, it's more or less the factory of the world. Thanks to globalization, a lot of products coming out of China. The GDP for manufacturing is roughly 45% for China. It's all manufacturing. So you can imagine the impact it would have if that closes down for the rest of the world. Now, Chinese New Year, they close down. So what does that mean? The ports, they have no port operators. Nobody is loading the containers onto the vessels. There are no trucks bringing containers to the ports. Factories are closed down. There's a shortage of labor. So it stops. Now what happens then is that it ends. Vessels, they don't have cargo to pick up, so they omit Chinese port, and it stops. Between Chinese New Year and 18th of March, let's say after that, Asia, including Malaysia, goes into lockdown or imposes heavy restrictions on their peoples. Borders close. International air travel it stops. International air travel is a big key, let's say, for supply chain, because it's the fastest way of getting goods from A to B. A lot of it goes by air, but more on that later. So the sea freight impact, well, it's huge. Let's say, because you get blank sailings, so there are no services anymore. They omit ports, so there's no cargo to be moved. So it's a huge drop of price, because of course the carriers, they want to have cargo, so they drop their prices tremendously. But it does not work yet, and the vessel capacity is expected to reduce, say, 30%, even more. Now, what happens shortly after that? In February and in March, China opens up again. So factories, they start again to produce, and slowly cargo goes back to the ports. The problem is, the rest of Asia is in lockdown, Europe is in lockdown, so the demand drops. So we have containers in the port, but nobody needs it anymore. So the freight price, it drops again to, let's say, $450 US per TEU in June. We see now a spike because there's some capacity coming back in, but it's still, we have space issues. Carriers, they cannot provide long-term rates. They do weekly basis, if you're lucky, 2 weekly. So we as freight forwarders, we have to take risks because our clients, they want to have monthly rates, 6-month rates. So we have to take risk and we have to predict basically what can happen or what not. So for us financially, it's not good. Another problem that you have, of course, let's say if carriers, they omit parts or they do blank sailings, is that you get an imbalance in equipment. So it takes time, let's say, for vessels to get the equipment there, to position and to load your cargo. And we need more carrier options to ensure that we can still serve the customers say on a weekly basis, which at this moment is not the case. Now, air freight, for all of you, let's say air freight is a big market for Bolloré here in, especially here in Malaysia. It accounts for 36% of my my activity. Mostly we move spare parts. So if the planes are flying, they need spare parts because it's based on flight hours. So if the planes don't fly, I don't move parts. So here you can see on the slide, you can see, let's say, the percentage of freighters versus belly cargo. Belly cargo is basically what goes into your passenger aircraft. And that's normally, there's not more than 15 tons. So you can see, let's say in 2016, the ratio was 48 to 52. So dedicated freighters versus belly cargo. And slowly towards 2036, the forecast is that this will decline. So you will get more belly cargo. On the right side of the picture, you will see that you need at least 10 packs, say belly cargo airplanes, passenger airplanes, to have the equivalent of the capacity of a full freighter. And why is this important? Here you can see, say, the data from Flight Radar. Let's say starting this year, let's say 20th of January, on average, there are 100,000 plus commercial flights every day, roughly. You can see, let's say 16th of March, it starts to drop. Countries, they close their borders. So all passenger aircraft, they stop. And you only have dedicated freighters. The problem with freighters is freighters are used basically to move from big hubs. For example, from Shanghai to Luxembourg, Paris, or from Shanghai to Singapore. And the rest is all covered, let's say, to the smaller airports, the smaller hubs is by passengers. So you can see a huge drop 30 March. The line is increasing, but that is basically because, let's say, within China, they started to fly domestically and in the US. On the right side, you see, let's say, the maps. The top picture is basically, it's a pre-COVID situation. You see there are a lot of planes, it's yellow, it's very dense. In the middle picture, you see COVID. You see it's almost nothing anymore. And now you see again, let's say, it was the 13th of July, you see there is more activity coming. So we hope it's a sign of recovery, and we hope that countries are opening up. We need it because we need capacity. Now, what happens normally? It's empty, but this is, let's say, how a freighter looks like. On the top right, you see a passenger airplane, but it's also half empty. So what did they do? There came a huge demand for masks, gowns, gloves. So what did they do? Let's say an aircraft needs to be loaded for at least 60% to be profitable. If you don't fly people, the cargo volumes, normally the belly cargo will not pay the bill. So what did some carriers do? KLM was one of them as well, is they moved boxes of gloves, masks on the passenger seats. Even at a later stage, while the situation prolonged, they took out the seats. And this is very costly for an airline to do, because this will cost more just to take out all the seats. So it has a huge impact, but we need the capacity. So currently, you see that, for example, the leading European groups, the light blue column is what they say that they will fly, And the dark blue is what they actually fly. So they say, okay, I fly, you can book, but then again, if there's not enough, if there are not enough bookings, they cancel the flight. So the problems are not solved yet. This is an overview that we did for one of our main customers, is to show basically, so what is the capacity? So if you see, for example, for example, the Paris-Hong Kong lane, it's, say, pre-COVID, 5%, and currently it is 9% of capacity. So you see, it's all still very red. Capacity is still very slow. Carriers are not flying at the moment, not too much. Now, as a freight forwarder, what we do is, let's say, to serve our clients, we are their business partners. We help them to grow their business and bring their goods from A to B. But for us to be able to do that, we need people. And one of the things that the issue that we faced was, the staff, the operations, so the well-being of employees. We needed to make sure that they were able, let's say, to do their work, that they felt happy and safe and secure. So just before Malaysia went into a lockdown, me and my team, let's say, we had almost daily meetings on what to do if we had to go in a lockdown. So luckily we worked everything out, and yes, of course, it was not perfect. But I think all along we managed pretty well to get activity going. And then, of course, I said people have to work from home. We have 300 people here. Access to IT systems remotely. We had, for example, 200 licenses, let's say, for a VPN under normal circumstances within Asia Pacific region. We have 4,000 people in Asia Pacific. Having to share 200 VPN licenses is not enough. Luckily, after a week or two, we had 2,500. So that's more than 50%. Not everybody needs to work remotely, and we would still be part of an essential service, so we could go to the office if needed. But of course, I said we try to avoid, because we had to face roadblocks. And if you get stopped by a roadblock, it's up to the discretion of the officer or the soldier there to let you go through, yes or no, even with a letter. Communication, of course, we have been pushed into, let's say, an online environment. As we joked with Jeroen this morning, we are old-fashioned. It's an old-fashioned business still. It's a very face-to-face, personal based. So we need to make sure that we can communicate. So we had every morning team calls. So we use Microsoft Teams, and it was a good tool, but it helped.
Harm, we're running out of time. If you
yes,
can,
I will quickly hurry up. Okay, so one of the main things, the solution for this all is have a BCP, plan it out and test run it. One of the external things is, and this is the most challenging part, we had to deal with conflicting information, for example, from various departments of the Malaysian government. What is essential goods? Skincare. Some women might say, yes, skincare is very essential for me. So for some others, might not. Borders closed between Singapore and Malaysia, yes or no? Interstate travel, can it be done? Can we keep the warehouse open? For some of our clients, yes. For some, we had to close. No international air travel, so we had no capacity to deal with. You can see it was 50%, and it's still challenging. The price impact, as you mentioned, prices go up 300, 500%, and it's still not cheap. We had to deal with blank sailings from ocean carriers, overcapacity, low demand. Cargo stuck in ports, especially for non-essential goods. So it was very difficult to get it out. Luckily, Port Klang was able to give every average 10 days, a 3-day window to get it out. Of course, communication with team members, operations, our third party, our truckers. And of course, our front office team, our sales team, they were very in close contact with all our clients. And at the same time, they were mapping out aid and relief, so gloves, gowns, and masks. So we very quickly switched, say, to a different vertical and to move. Again, let's say the solution for most of dealing with all these challenges is to have a BCP. You need to know what to do if. In summary, again, have a BCP. I can't stress it out more. It's very important that you have it. You need to be agile to quick changing markets. E-commerce will play a very big part of it and much bigger than it was before. And we as freight forwarders, we have to adapt to that one as well. Digitalization and innovation, work smarter, not necessarily harder. And more flexibility. We are traditional office people, so we need to work maybe on a work from home policy as well. And that was it in a rush.
Thank you very much, Harm, for that interesting view of what the challenges are for actual logistics operators. We now move on to our final speaker, Karen White. She is the Group Chief Operating Officer for Mega Fortress, and she's going to talk about globalization versus regionalization, the supply chain management. Over to you, Karen.
My apologies. Technical difficulties. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. It's actually been very interesting listening to everyone's discussions, because all very relevant and prevalent to the industry in Malaysia at the moment. But we fall as a manufacturer. We actually are very involved in the logistics chain and the supply chain. Unfortunately, Dr. Deb did speak about plastic usage. Sorry about that. I'm going to go through a bit of some of what we do, which is predominantly in plastics. Just to give you a brief indication of who we are. Thank you very much, Dr. David and MDBC, for the opportunity to discuss today. We are Mega Fortress. We've been going for 24 years, since 1996. As you can see, established by two brothers, Dr. Nick and Adrian, our CEO. This was our very first seal. I was asked earlier to actually give someone an indication of what our company does. So security seals, we do tamper evidence security seals, and that really forms part of a very big supply chain globally, which is something which I knew, but I didn't quite understand the magnitude thereof until COVID really reached us, because it really showcased how movement of our product was so embedded within the global supply chain, and how some environments actually stopped working if we were actually not supplying. So from our perspective, we were unfortunately, or fortunately, we are third biggest manufacturer in the world in terms of security seals. This just gives you a bit of an outlook in terms of our global reach, which is really one of our strongest points. We are in 25 countries. We are right around the world, which is quite interesting because it's shown us a domino effect in terms of how the supply chain has changed. Right around. I mean, every country and every region has had a different time frame and a different, there's been different magnitude. I mean, Europe was a lot larger hit than the Americas, for instance, and South Africa is currently still in a full lockdown. So we've been very widespread, which has been interesting for us. At least we've had, a much larger spread in terms of our manufacturing. As some of our panelists have said, during our MCO and RMCO, it's been quite difficult to operate, but luckily we were down for 5 days. production days. After 5 days, we were back up and running. Unfortunately, we cannot stop. I mean, as we are so involved in the supply chain of every other governance and company around the world, we produce here in Malaysia per year 400 million pieces, which is quite interesting. It's a large number. We've also got a factory in China, but it's much smaller than the one that we have in Malaysia. This is our main operation. These are the seals. So just to give you a very quick rundown, security seals are used in pretty much every supply chain that you can think of. Anything from containers to food safety to, these really are security tamper evident seals, which we do. So as you can see, these are just a little range of some of the seals that we do. We also do security bags, tamper evident once again, predominantly used in airports and banks. We have tamper evident tape, especially during COVID. This has been quite interesting because you would really like to know at this stage if anyone has touched your food. I think Dr. David has said that he's got more containers from Food Panda now to last his grandchildren in their lifetime. So it'd be nice to know that your food has not been contaminated. We do a lot of business in the casino industry. And then these are just some of our clients and some of the industries that we serve. So it gives you a global take on really the industries that we are currently servicing. And that's right across the, as you can see, from air to food to retail, a lot in shipping, a lot in the casino business, hospitality, oil and gas, etc. This is a quick executive summary. I know this is quite wordy, but before COVID-19, we obviously saw that there was quite a lot of trade policy turbulence, etc., happening within the manufacturing environment. We, especially from our China plant, for instance, to America, we knew that we had to move back our manufacturing, which was quite interesting. So we moved that back to Malaysia. So we'll speak a little bit about that. COVID has obviously heightened our awareness of the fragility of our supply chain. And that's predominantly, I will go through slightly some of that and quite quickly because I know we are running out of time. But we were all fragile, and I think that we were all taken off guard in terms of how fragile our supply chain actually was. We've predominantly used just-in-time, I think, as a manufacturing environment. Just-in-time manufacturing is something which is very prevalent. Most companies use just-in-time purely based upon the fact that it is, more cost-effective from a cost-saving perspective, just-in-time, your cash flow, your revenues, etc. At the moment, not knowing what's going to happen, we actually changed the way we do business. We've started stockpiling more, and our supply chain has really changed. And I'll show you a bit about that a few slides down. Obviously, the strategic shutdown and reopening of the manufacturing hub has been quite significant because, as we know, there have been in some countries second waves. Our China plant, for instance, is still taking some time to actually get back up and running. It has not got back up and running yet to its full capacity, and we're talking many, many months after the start. Our pricing modeling has changed completely, to be quite frank, and I think some of my panelists have also had a discussion about how, there is going to be battles when it comes to pricing strategies. So ours is completely changed. Manufacturers, from a global supply chain network, we're implementing different regional strategies at this stage as a manufacturer. As you can see, by 400 million pieces coming out of our manufacturing environment in Malaysia, the fragility of ours was predominantly linked in China in terms of our raw material. So let me just go through a little bit about the effects of our supply chain. Obviously, the local isolation started, ongoing local distribution and local supply chain, the pandemic spread, as we know, which was addressed with isolation effects. That had large-scale disruption. Sorry, just remove that. Large-scale disruption and lockdowns on all levels, as we know, from different regions. Pandemic spread after the isolation efforts have failed, and that had a massive impact for us on a local and global supply chain disruption, which triggered the capacity constraints, not only in raw material, but also in people. You know, by not having people in the office and not having people in manufacturing environments, you know, there was an enormous amount of supply and demand which could not be met. There were different shocks in the supply chain of COVID effects. Your supply shock started, which was your availability of goods sourced from main suppliers, both finished goods for sale and products used in factories. There was a scramble to sort out what production was feasible and what demand could be met, as we know. Then there was a demand shock, which just deepened the crisis for us. You know, consumers were stockpiling staples in order to comply with restrictions on movement. And there was a scramble to redirect inventories to identify priorities. Now, as I mentioned, we are very embedded in supply chains, and from a corporate governance perspective, a lot of if we look at a lot of our industries, many of them actually would stop if we stopped supplying them because it's so embedded in their corporate governance. So we had to really look at what the effect would have been if we were not able to deliver on our products. And then aftershock, which is the bullwhip effect. So, which is always interesting for me, and I think it's something that we're currently going through at the moment, especially with our suppliers. You know, they've got a small increase from a consumer perspective because businesses are still shut, or they're predominantly on a much smaller scale. So, you know, we're looking at about a 40 to 50% drop. And then the net result, obviously short gaming, because from a production perspective, everyone has ramped up their production. So our production's been ramped up. The effect for Mega Fortress supply chain during the initial stages of COVID, obviously halted orders from China, as we know, both from our raw material perspective and from our China supplier or China factory. Supply shortages, as I mentioned, we had a lot of our raw material from China, but we actually saw already in December, when I got here and in the beginning of January, that there was a vulnerability. And we got in the queue very quickly to start stockpiling. So we were quite lucky in terms of that, lucky or strategically placed to start stockpiling some of our very specific items out of China. We then started doing our regional alternative sourcing, which is really what this conversation is about, and then re-engineering of our design concept. So, you know, the statement at the bottom says, could COVID-19 be the black swan event that finally forces many companies and entire industries to rethink and transform their global supply chain model? I believe so, without a doubt. I'm currently looking at numerous different ways of doing it. And I think all of us are. I think there's no white paper, there's no thesis, and there's no dissertation about this. I think this has struck us very hard because we weren't expecting a pandemic, and I don't think any supply chain actually had the visibility to understand what this effect would have, especially from a China perspective. Now, the effect on manufacturing, just a quick statistic there to give you an idea of what it looked like for the first half of the percentage that was down. The expected decline in global manufacturing value add output, which is finished product for 2020, shows you 11% drop from Q4 2019 for China, which is massive. I mean, that hasn't been seen in, you know, almost 100 years. And then globally, you can also see that there's a 5% drop for the first half. That's from Baker McKenzie. And then you expect a decline in global output H1, which is your first half of 2020. And you can see that there's a significant drop in the numerous industries. So the first wave, obviously critical in globally scarce raw material shortage, resulting in long-term capacity shortages. This is very interesting because your end-tier supplier only has a certain amount of capacity. And with that capacity, we are only able to get as much from them as we can. You know, they have to supply numerous amounts of people, and you have to get in line, as anyone else does. Dr.
Erin,
David, you've got
we're
yes.
running out of time here. So if you could, can you speed it up a little bit? Thank you.
Let's go through it. I'm going to quickly just go through some of the, I won't go through some of it, but let me give you an idea. Just from a regional perspective. So as I said, globalization versus regionalization, we're looking at just the diversification of potential acquisition of satellite manufacturing environments. So instead of having manufacturing only in one area, we're looking at manufacturing in numerous regions, and that is worldwide and globally, and they will have their own supply chains. We are also looking at regionalization in terms of financial and contractual commitments with different suppliers, and then adopting full visibility through digitalization with our supply chains and our end tier. This is our resilient supply chain, which would be in an ideal world. I won't go through all of it, but it gives you quite a good indication of where you would like to be. Very flexible ecosystem of suppliers and partners that can handle your shortfall, digital collaboration, ideally to be able to see your end tier along with, it's basically an ERP, but a helicopter viewpoint in terms of your entire supply chain. So you're never caught off guard. And then rapid generation of insight, which is really business analytics. And business analytics for us is very, very important. So we're using business analytics as a tool to guide our business. And during this time, during COVID, this has become probably one of the most prevalent insights in terms of how we should be steering our ship through our business analytics. And that is, I won't go through that, just this is what we've done from our perspective, but we will share this presentation afterwards. And that is it from my side. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. Actually, when you showed the picture of the bolt seals, it brought bad memories back. I was the director of supply chain security for General Motors when 9/11 happened. And within a month, we had to buy bolt seals for all our trucks. And we had about 10,000 trucks a day running. And everybody in logistics hated me. So thank you very much. Appreciate the insights. We're going to go now to a Q&A session. Let's bring all the panelists back. And if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box that you will see at the bottom of your screen. Let's start while we're warming up.
Can we have all speakers back live, please? Karen, Deb, Harm?
We're missing Deb. While we're waiting, I'll start with you, Karen, since you were last and fresh in the mind of the speakers. Just a question to warm things up a little bit. We now see a lot more regionalization, people holding more inventories, everything that we thought was evil about 6 months ago. And do you think we're going to swing a little bit too much in the pendulum swings all the way back to a very safe type of thing? Or do you think we'll come up with good ways to build resiliency for the future?
I think it's a very good question. Thank you very much, Dr. David. I think that at the moment, the swing is probably quite significant, to be quite frank. I think due to the fact that the pandemic is something which our generation has not seen, therefore, it's not something which we've necessarily schooled ourselves at, whether we're academics or operators. It's something that we were not expecting. It's not something which is built into our business continuity. So the pendulum I think the pendulum has probably already swung quite far. But I do believe that it will come back into stabilization. I think you can find a balance between globalization and regionalization. I just think that the agility of the supply chain is going to be far more open. I think with digital transformation, that visibility of your full supply chain is going to be the most important. So I do hope that from a agility perspective and a visibility perspective, the pendulum does start swinging or more neutralizing itself, because there is in this world space for both globalization and regionalization.
Thanks very much, Karen. We have a question from the audience. I think it's Danny Seo, if I get the name correct. Is Danny, do you want to ask your question directly to the participants?
All right, sure. So good evening, everyone. Okay, so my question was to Harm and Deborah. So right now in Malaysia, we can see that as time goes by over the last 2-3 years, there's been an increase in the cost of foreign labor, which is particularly hitting the 3PL industry quite hard. Now with COVID-19, what we notice as well is that there is a restriction in terms of how movement of people across borders, and this is actually causing the problem to get a lot worse. So my question here is, what can we do as an industry to actually work together to at least alleviate some of this problem that we are facing over here with regards to labor availability?
Harm, do you want to start on that?
Well, foreign labor, yeah, we also use them, but I think the cost has increased. But I think, let's say, there's a bigger underlying problem here, is that Malaysia as itself relies a lot on foreign labor, and this is not something that is solved very easily. You see, most of the time, say the foreign laborers, they live in dormitories. They're packed with many people in one room, and especially now you see the situation in Singapore, where a lot of these dormitories are they're full with COVID patients. So we need to provide also, let's say, better living conditions for them. And of course, you provide better living conditions, that means the price goes up. So yeah, it's a tough question. I think on the short term, difficult. Long term, we need help from the Malaysian government to support this and find a way to work our way around this, or automation. But that's very hefty investment as well.
Thank you, Harm. We have another question here, and I would like to direct this towards Jeroen. Geopolitical risk is getting deeper into the market. How is it going to impact supply chain management in the next 2-3 years? And I think especially in the Malaysian context.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a very good question. I think we are living in very uncertain times. The risk profile that we have now is very different. I mean, when I grew up, and I think a lot of us, risk was something, a change in 3, 4, 5 years. Now we're living in an era where things can change within 6 months or 1 year. I'm assuming that the gentleman wants to have like a direct answer, but unfortunately the answer is that we don't know. We just simply don't know what is going to happen in the next 2-3 years. If it can stay the way it is now, it can also drastically change. So what I advise is, if you have the resources, work through different scenarios specific for your industry. If you don't, if you are a smaller company, go and prepare for the worst. I think the message is, it is a very volatile time at the moment. If you have to prepare and you can't prepare for different scenarios, prepare for the worst. Cash is king. Keep cash in the company at the moment. And I would say the third part would be, make sure that you still see opportunities. It's not all dark and gloomy out there. It is just changing very fast at the moment.
Thank you, Jeroen. And building on that, I'd like to pose the next question to Marco Tiemann. Marco, as Jeroen said, there are opportunities out there. Do you think halal supply chains can take advantage of this new normal to grow prosper and get bigger?
Thank you, Doctor. Well, we've seen e-commerce explosion over the past months because of those lockdowns, and that's there to stay and growing bigger. You have to organize, I think, the last mile better. So city logistics in the Klang Valley will be important, as well as in Johor and Penang. Halal logistics, we have seen very little initiatives regarding the last mile development. So you have halal portals or supermarkets that do now delivery, and they just consider, they don't consider halal logistics, or just want to segregate it from pork and beer. Yeah, so halal is a little bit more complex than that. So I think there's an opportunity for logistics service providers to develop halal delivery solutions and halal supply chain solutions. It's a fast growing industry, so there's good demands there, definitely.
Thank you, Professor Tiemann. Now I'd like to ask one of our audience members, Asmin, if you want to ask your question directly to the panelists, please do so now.
Yes, please. Yeah, it's just a general question. I'm just wondering why force majeure was never imposed when we have all these problems and all the restrictions and a lot of work is being delayed. I noticed that force majeure was not imposed at all. So that was my question. To all.
Who wants to take it on? I'm really not an expert on the force majeure situation, but I'll hazard a guess here. I think usually when force majeure is it's a single event that's very concentrated that happens, like a war or a hurricane or a typhoon or something like that. Here with COVID-19 creeping up in different countries, different times, different reactions from countries, it's been hard to create a force majeure that holds in one country that doesn't hold in another. And to me, for global supply chains, that is a major situation. You can't say it's one in one country and not in the other, whereas now it's spreading through the world. That's my 2 cents contribution to that. But quite frankly, what do I know? Anybody else who? I just know from my industry experience, we always love to have force majeure situations and push the blame on somebody else. But I think in this case, it's very hard to do.
If I may, I think you're right. I think force majeure is I'm also not a force majeure expert, just like you. I think there's one situation where the government can declare force majeure. I think force majeure is also more of a one-off direct situation. And in this case, what we have seen is the opposite, is that there was a big disruption, but not a complete stop for supply chains. So I think it's hard to make the case that you can't deliver or you'll have problems, you'll be late, but not that it's impossible. I think it'll be difficult to invoke force majeure. My opinion. Again, I'm not a force majeure expert.
Maybe next time we can get a legal expert on the panel as well, guys.
Well, you'd have to extend the panel to another 30 minutes then at least.
Yeah, true. Maybe we can get Hans into the
yes,
program.
Let's get Hans into
Hans van der Zijden, can you join the show, please? Can you unmute?
Okay, hi Karen, my name is Hans. Actually, we are a little bit in the same boat because our manufacturing was in China and we managed to switch it over when China closed down to Thailand. But I was interested, you mentioned you're using the data analytics, right? In what way, because this is very short term, did the data analytics assist you in your company?
Very interesting question. If I had to show you the KPIs and the performance contract that my senior business analyst has, I think that many of us would really start having heart palpitations, because the complexity thereof is that we use data to analyze pretty much everything in our business. As a manufacturer, I mean, obviously, you would use your OEE for your manufacturing, but we've gone a step further to really look at geopolitical, at you know, a lot of our product, for instance, is index-based, our raw materials. So, you know, buying trends, buying patterns, pricing. We've used data analytics right across, and especially at the moment, every single product, every pricing, every product, every geopolitical situation, you know, fuel prices, freight costs, everything. And once you put all of that data together, it's really how you read it that makes it interesting, and that you know, you can collect as much data as you want to, but it's really the data that it's what you get out of it. So, you know, for us, we've specifically got a department that works with data analytics because of the size of the company, and that data analytics it's fantastic to have someone that's able to give you a dashboard really to look at from a company perspective that can guide your ship very quickly, as opposed to us not having full visibility. I hope that answers your question, Hans. I'm not sure if it does, but if you do want further information on it, you're welcome to contact me personally. I'm happy to share with you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's about 4:35 now, and we are running about 20 minutes beyond the schedule. So I think we're going to wrap up the session now. I'd like to thank all the participants and all the people who we don't see, in the non-video participants too, and hand it back to Marco Winter at MDBC to wrap it up. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dave. And thank you to all the speakers and the moderator of Malaysia Institute for Supply Chain Innovation, MISI, Art of Supply Chain, Bolloré, LBB International, and Mega Fortress Malaysia. On behalf of the audience, can we please give you a round of applause, all of you. Thank you so much for your participation today. And to the audience, I hope that you all learned as much as I did during this last hour. No matter what kind of organization you're in, I think from agriculture to manufacturing, fast-moving consumer goods, aerospace, anything was very relevant today. So thank you very much for that complete overview. Yes, we are over time, but to the audience, please allow me just a couple more minutes for closing remarks and a few MDBC polls. Of course, MDBC will continue to deliver value to you during this RMCO period. You will have seen the list of upcoming webinars. This month, there will be another Members for Members and a new edition of the Human Resource Forum already by next week. And in August, we will have 2 webinars with Eurocham Malaysia, with VIP guests, the Director General of the Ministry of Health and the Minister of Finance. So that's coming to you the first half of August. But we also would like to hear on your favorite topics. So firstly, for another Members for Members topic, what would you be most interested in? Can we have the poll, please? And multiple answers are allowed. And of course, if you have any other ideas, please contact us directly to discuss these ideas. All right, I think all short, quick answers. So please submit. Thank you. All right, that's the results that we got on here. Let's take a screenshot. Connectivity, well, that's great because that will indeed be the next one that we have scheduled, which is in nearly 2 weeks from today. I think on the 29th of July. Excellent, thank you. We'll definitely listen close to your ideas, and for the person or persons that filled in others, please contact us with your ideas. Thank you. All right, one of our ongoing activities is Move with MDBC. So that's an app that supports you with the movements of just 5 kilometers. Yes, the pools and the gyms are open, but we still continue to support you here with our activities. You can scan this QR code and join in this activity. That will be great, just to keep you moving. You can do it in your own time and know it's not a competition, all right? So please let us help you to continue moving during this time. All right, MDBC would like to thank our premium partners for their strong support, which is what we definitely require during this difficult year. We still welcome more advertisers, more sponsors and partners. So if you have any opportunity for that, please contact us. And finally, we would appreciate your feedback on these MDBC polls. How would you rate this webinar in terms of content and in terms of technical setup and flow? And if you scroll down, you see a third question on how do you value MDBC's report card during this MCO period? And please note that 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. All right, so 1 on the content, 1 on the technical setup and flow today. We've noticed that the internet connections are not super today. I don't know if it has to do with weather or maybe also a bit of construction going on in our building, but we hope that for the audience, everything was okay today. All right, we'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for submitting this one. And with that, we would like to enter the weekend. It's somewhere closing in 5 o'clock, not yet, don't worry. And 5 o'clock on a Friday means weekend is starting. So once again, speakers, thank you very much, Dave, for taking the moderator role today. Wishing everybody a great weekend, and until next time, thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.